And I will share my screen here. And let's get started. So you should be seeing the title slide. Can I get a thumbs up? All right, cool. Awesome. So thanks everybody for joining us. We're obviously here to talk today about the Municipal Composting Readiness Report. I'm Isaac Berg, Program Director for Food, Climate, Environment here at the Food Policy Council, and just really appreciate you joining us. I would welcome folks to just put their name and affiliations in the chat if they'd like. But we're gonna kind of hop in. As a heads up, I'm going to kind of talk at you for a little while, but you're more than welcome to put any questions and things like that, or raise your hand in the chat. And then, towards we're going to leave plenty of time, after I'm done talking at you for a little while, to ask you for questions and feedback, and that's going to be really valuable for all of the work that I'm doing to get your feedback and comments. So stick with me for a little bit. We're going to go through this, and as I said, please feel free to put comments and questions in the chat, or raise your hand. So let's get moving here. So what are we going to talk about today? First, we want to really introduce you to the RIFPC, Rhode Island Food Policy Council, and give you just a brief taste, if you will, of what the Food Policy Council is about. Then we're going to dive in and talk about where this report originated, how it was done, where it sits within the wider scope of plans, both for the Food Policy Council and for the state. And then we're going to share with you some of our key findings and what we plan to do about those findings and what we hope to offer you in terms of services and things that can really help your causes. And then again, as I mentioned, we're going to ask you about what did we miss? Maybe if we got something wrong, if there are other types of assistance that you need from us. If you can help us identify some of those things that maybe we missed, we think we did a great job here, but we're always open to learning more things, and we view this as the start of the conversation on how we can help you move forward municipal composting, and far from the end of it. So that's kind of where we're going today. And so, as I mentioned a little bit about, the Food Policy Council, our mission is to build an equitable, accessible, economically vibrant, and environmentally sustainable food system for all Rhode Islanders. And, while we apply this to the food system writ large, it's equally as important when thinking about composting and food waste reduction. And we're going to be talking about how that applies as we move through our presentation today. So when I talk about the food system, what does that mean? When the Food Policy Council talks about the food system, what does that mean? So that's thinking about, from the start, which includes, the production on farms and fisheries throughout the state, to processing, distribution, all the way to what we're talking about today, which is food waste. And we're thinking about all of the different things that really need to be in place to support those things. So healthy soil, healthy water, or clean water, clean air, capital access, policy, all of those different things are really going to support all of those different, production and processing, the things that are going on in your neighborhoods. So that's how we try and think about the food system. And we address that in a number of different ways. Our priorities include, I think one of our strongest things that we're really proud of is our work as network weavers and educators. So we try to help, think about how we can create better policy and empower people and educate them. But then we also have three different project focus areas. So we always are thinking about how we can increase food access and nutrition security. We have are thinking about how we can really make a more thriving food business and economy. And then my area, of course, which is food, climate, environment. How can we think about the interactions between the food system and the climate and making them more sustainable as we go along? And so we offer a lot of different services. But one of the things that we're pretty proud of is some of the resources and data that we have available. So these include the municipal fact sheets. And we'll talk specifically about composting soon. But in these fact sheets, there's a lot of, as well as our data dashboard, our policy tracker, that are all on the website. And we welcome you to come take a look at. But in our fact sheets specifically, they offer a snapshot on things like how many restaurants and farms, how are you using your land compared to, and comparing these things to the state. So if you look at the top right of each of these, you sort of have a little map of the land uses. And as you go down, you'll see there are, again, all of those different statistics, and we'll be updating those. But alongside that is a toolkit on some of the best ways you can use this data. So we really encourage you to go to rifoodcouncil.com, .org, I should say, /municipal-facts-sheets, and check those out when you have a chance. And I'll go ahead and I see they're already in the chat. So thank you very much for that, Allison. So that's a great, resource that you have outside of just the report and all the other great work that we're doing. So now let's talk about the report and let's talk about composting. And of course, again, if you have any questions about the Food Policy Council, feel free to put them in the chat. So why are we doing this report? Well, overarching all of this work is that we're sending 100,000 tons or thereabouts of food waste per year to landfills. And we can talk about, all the many reasons why that's not a good thing. But our landfill is reaching capacity. There's a myriad of environmental reasons why that's not a good thing. And a lot of that food is perfectly edible, and we want to feed hungry people. So we really want to see less of that 100,000 tons, going to the landfill. And why specifically municipalities? Well, if you look at NRDC, their reports have said that municipal waste is the single largest source at around 48%. So, there's still 52% from other places. We're not going to forget about those in any way, shape, or form. But if we're thinking about the one single largest source, it is municipalities. So with that in mind, with that context, we set out to put together a statewide plan that we're calling the Wasted Food Solutions Action Plan on how we can reduce food waste and recycle more of it. And we really want to address all the barriers that are stopping us from doing the right things, reducing food waste, donating it, composting it, and taking advantage of the opportunities to do better. We expect to have our first draft done later this month, and then begin to fully publicize, with all revisions and things like that at next year's compost conference in March. Now, again, the municipal composting report is both a part of that and will also inform our plan. But again, it's also a way to start the conversation on addressing our biggest source of food waste. How do we really start to think about what are the things you need and how we can address them? So that's kind of where that fits in with what the Food Policy Council is doing. But at the same time, Commerce is putting together the food strategy plan, Rhode 2.0, and DEM is putting together their solid waste management plan. And we see this as additive to our work. So the food strategy is focusing on the entire food system. The solid waste management plan is focusing on the entire waste stream from sharps to hazardous waste. So we're looking to both inform their plans and ideally get into greater depth than they might be able to otherwise get with such a broader focus, while we can focus on just food waste and the solutions to those issues. And so, we'll also be sitting on the advisory committee of the solid waste management plan. So we'll be actively promoting our findings. So please help make our findings better so that we can make these other plans even better. So that's where we're going. And yes, I believe there was a question about if we're referring to Rhode Island DEM, and that is correct. So that's sort of the context of where this plan sits within why we're doing it, where it fits within the Food Policy Council's role and the state. So let's talk about the process. How do we actually put together a report? So in May, we hired some consultants to help us with this work. And we started with direct outreach via email to all the town planners, to DPW staff in the state. We tried to identify some environmental commissions and environmental leaders. And, we followed up with phone calls to those who we were not able to reach. About a dozen municipalities were willing to sit with our consultants for interviews, most of those being in person. And while we recognize that's far from an exhaustive list, we do also recognize that, not perhaps having the capacity to talk with us is, some information as well. Certainly not definitive information, but information. And so, we did those interviews, and we also looked at a number of secondary factors that might influence whether a town, whether it would be easier for a town to move forward or not. And we'll discuss those in a second. But we also didn't do this work in a vacuum. At the same time that this work is happening, we applied for a large EPA grant, and that was focused on underserved communities, speaking with, half a dozen municipalities to varying degrees as partners. We also helped 3 municipalities apply for USDA grant funding. And we can come back to that later as to how we're able to help with that. But we tried to factor in, what we're hearing as part of that process alongside the interviews that we were conducting. So let's talk about the factors that influenced our evaluation. So again, the first thing we looked at was just some very basic facts about the town. A larger, more densely populated town is going to be a little more cost effective to service than maybe a small rural town. It's also more likely that those with higher incomes or maybe with college degrees are more likely to participate in composting programs. And so we look at that from both an understanding, but also knowing that if we're going to center equity in our mission, we need to be able to tailor to the needs of all communities, not just the rich ones, not the urban ones, but we need to at least understand where each of these communities sit in that. And so as you look at our chart, we were able to interview, these were the 12 municipalities we were able to interview. They included smaller towns like Little Compton and New Shoreham, as well as Providence and Warwick, as well as, towns with a little higher median incomes like East Greenwich, and lower median incomes like Woonsocket. So we do think we got a decent sample there. But that's far from, of course, the only factors that we were looking at. So beyond the basic facts of the town, we wanted to explore a number of less tangible aspects. So, it was very important to recognize that this was not an educational exercise for us. We weren't trying to change anyone's opinions or goals. It was a learning exercise. So we wanted to understand where these municipalities are, what their views are, whether they're positive, negative, whether there's, and some of those views might be a perception or they might be real, but if you feel them, if that's what you're hearing, we need to understand that and be able to address that one way or another. So these factors included, in no particular order, political will. So do the leaders, both elected and town staff, find this a priority? Needless to say, if they do, it's a lot easier to move things forward. How does this fit within your environmental goals? And do you have any? Now, I think it's important to emphasize that you don't need environmental goals or even really to care about the environment to want to compost. There's a lot of reasons you might otherwise want to compost. But understanding and caring about what the environmental benefits are certainly makes one more likely to act alongside all of those other benefits. What existing programs do you have? Whether that be for trash, recycling, composting, how are the fees structured? Who pays them? And we also have, and in thinking about this, we also had to weigh if your existing programs maybe have already captured the low-hanging fruit, so to speak. Are you ready to really take the next step to go all in? So I'm just going to use Providence for an example. That's where I live. So I'm a little more tied in here. They have a drop-off network. They have private haulers. They have an education and outreach program. So some of the low-hanging fruit that other cities might be able to build on, they're already doing. Are they willing now to build a site? Are they willing to go citywide? Those are some of the questions that we have to think about. Forgetting Providence for a minute, with all of the cities, is where are you currently, and how is it going to be for you to expand what you're doing? And what does the existing infrastructure look like, right? And have you thought about what it might look like when it comes to composting? So if you have an existing leaf and yard waste site that could incorporate food waste, or an existing transfer station, could you repurpose a small portion for just a drop-off, or maybe a small processing site? Do you have existing drop-off sites? Are you willing to even think about where in the town a drop-off or processing site might be located? So these are some of the types of questions that we're asking. And then, is the community engaged and interested in seeing it happen? So as much as all these other factors matter, if the community really wants to see it happen, might be as important as any. And, I don't see this as a negative statement in any way. Our town staff and elected leaders, they don't tend to want to do things that their community doesn't want to see happen, and they tend to see things happen that their community does want to see happen. So it's really important to have the community support behind this. So let's take a look at some of the top 5 communities that our consultants identified. And really, I think the important thing to focus on is more why they identified them as top 5, rather than like this being a static point or hey, good for them. The first community was Bristol. And, I do want to point out in our report, you're going to see breakdowns of the interviews and individual assessments of each community's readiness, alongside a graphic like the one that is on the screen here and that you're going to see in the next few slides. And again, keeping in mind that readiness today or when we did the interview is not static. And we really invite you to prove us right if we rated you highly and you're on this call, or to help you prove us wrong if we rated you low. I would love for a community that we would, rated low to come talk to us and say, no, we're ready. And we're ready, then the Food Policy Council is ready to help you. So again, the first was Bristol. The thing that our consultants really thought made them ready was a strong political will for bringing composting to town. And again, bringing in my personal experience, as I said, these reports don't happen in a vacuum. I was asked to go to a town council meeting alongside one of our composting partners to, speak about a potential pilot program. And, that's something we're happy to do to promote composting generally, if that would help move your program forward. And we also helped them apply for USDA grant funding. They seem to clearly want to see a curbside pilot program get off the ground. And I think that was reflected in the interview there. So, I would just, again, political will was very important in this particular case. The next community that they identified was Middletown, another good opportunity for expansion. One of the things they highlighted here was that Middletown currently has a pay-as-you-throw program, which really gives incentives to residents to reduce their waste. And again, they exhibited strong community interest. And alongside that, I can confirm that they were partners on that large EPA grant proposal I mentioned, and are looking at a number of opportunities to explore funding, with a committed staff. So that was 2. The third one is a little unique in that regard. It's New Shoreham, and they're, a tiny community, which goes against, what I talked about with looking at larger, more densely populated communities being easy. But I think one of the biggest things here is they're an island, and they understand their challenges of getting the waste off the island and managing it more sustainably. And so they started a pilot program processing their own materials in an in-vessel processor. And so I think our consultants rightly noted that, they have an opportunity now, because it's just getting started, to really take it to the next level and ensure the program continues into the future. So our fourth one is South Kingstown. So this one, they really focused on that community interest. South Kingstown has a strong environmental commission, which has pushed for the recent opening of a community drop-off. And they're really looking to push to expand the program. Their environmental commission is excited about, could we do our own processing, which may be challenging. But, our goal as the Food Policy Council is to take that community passion and help them understand the best ways to move forward. And we're going to talk in just a little bit about how we're going to be doing that. And then finally, our fourth one is Little Compton, another community that we showed that had a strong sustainability culture and an existing pilot program in place. And so, they identified a few different challenges like staff turnover and the seasonal nature of the community, but they saw an opportunity to put in place education and outreach programs to really help support participation and expansion. So again, I would highly recommend going through any of the communities that you are interested in that we highlighted and really digging into those interviews. And we welcome your questions once you've had an opportunity. Um, and which reminds me, Allie, did you put the link to the in the chat?
I am doing it right now.
Awesome. So the report is available on our website, and so we do welcome you to take a look at that at your leisure. But let's jump into some key takeaways, because again, this report is less about any particular community and more about how we can start to support you and give you the resources that you need. So what are some of the key takeaways? When we think about the totality of our interviews and discussions with municipal leaders, one of the biggest challenges we encountered, and if you are one of the municipal leaders on this call, I don't think you'll be surprised to learn, was staffing constraints. Municipal staff doesn't feel they have the capacity sometimes to even think about new programs, much less implement them. And again, we'll talk about how we're going to address that a little bit in our next slide. So among the municipalities who do want to start thinking about programs, the enthusiasm for processing in their towns tended to be low. That's not exactly shocking. And there's a variety of concerns, from odor and vector concerns, just the uncertainty of where it would go, cost concerns, again, staffing to implement. I don't think anyone on this call will be shocked to hear this particular takeaway. But there's a little more enthusiasm for implementing drop-off programs and curbside programs, as those are maybe considered a little lower stakes projects, and they address the need to reduce the waste going to the landfill. But of course, we all know it has to go somewhere, and we want to think about what would that actually look like in your town, and how can we get that to be financially feasible, and we'll address that. Of course, funding for the programs, and specifically funding models, are a key question. And how can we implement these programs without incurring major costs, especially in the short term, is something people are really focused on. Again, not a big shocker. And then, sort of perception of, again, thinking even just about drop-off programs and curbside collection, and how we can educate people and get them excited is really crucial for moving forward. So what are we going to do? How can we help? So the first thing that we want to offer is we're going to be putting together municipal composting templates of sorts. Now, it's important to understand that every program is going to be at least somewhat unique and have its, unique challenges. So it's best for us to work with you to understand your community. And, this was a first attempt at that. But the more we can work on this together and customize a template for you, that'll make it even more successful. But regardless, we're going to lay out some of the overarching program options, provide a resource directory for you, so you'll know who are some of the folks that are available to help you directly with services, and some case studies on how communities are moving forward. Now, we talked about how enthusiasm for composting on a site is low, and hopefully by understanding, that you don't necessarily have to build something the size of the Johnston landfill in order to start composting. You can do something the size of a shipping container or a 1 cubic yard bin. And so maybe that won't be something that your community wants to go down that path. That's okay. But we want to at least make sure you understand what all of the options and resources and things like that are. Another big one, again, is providing technical assistance on grant programs. So This can include EPA grant programs that we've applied for, USDA funding, which has been fairly consistent over the last few years. And we've seen communities here, including Providence, win both USDA and EPA grant funding. And there are other programs that support food waste reduction and composting. So, we can help you identify the right opportunities, brainstorm what's going to work for your town, and then even help you apply for those grants, as we did with 3 different communities this summer. But what I will say is the sooner you reach out to us and say you want to work with us, that you're excited to find opportunities, the more likely you'll be able to get support from the right people in your town that are needed in order to move these things forward. Maybe you need a resolution. Maybe you need this person on board. The more that we can get, some planning in place so that we can answer their questions, the likelier we are to get in a application and really provide some funding. But we also don't want to have to rely on the federal government and whatever programs happen to be available at a given time for moving forward. So our friends in Massachusetts were recently recognized as one of the most successful food waste reduction programs in the Northeast, if not the country. And it's in no small part because they have a dedicated source of funding. So one of our goals is to create that for Rhode Island. And the compost fund, which applies a $2 per ton surcharge to waste going to landfills, is, we believe, the best way to get there. And this past legislative cycle, South Kingstown was the first community to write a letter of support to the legislature to say, hey, we want to see this happen. And so we're happy to support you in getting that language together to write a letter from your town to make that happen. And then finally, last but not least, we're going to be coming in the coming weeks, we'll be bringing on an additional staffer to support education and outreach programming. So this can look different in different towns, but we're thinking everything from a presentation that the library is giving to the Environmental Commission, to your schools. We want to teach you, we find often the best way to really get enthusiasm is people want to learn how to compost at home. But when they do, they quickly realize, well, maybe this isn't going to work for me, or maybe I don't have a backyard, or things like that. And so what options exist for those who can't? And then once they start to learn about those options, they get really excited to say, hey, we need to bring this to my town. And so that really starts to build the momentum of people getting interested in all of the different types of programs. And so those are the types of things that we are looking to provide this coming year. And we hope that you will take advantage of any or all of them. So with that in mind, I do want to open it up because, again, I said I would talk at you for a while. But I really want to get your feedback. So here is the question. What did we miss? So thinking about what you heard so far about how we did the report and, the different communities, I want to open this up to discussion, and feel free to raise your hand or, put things in the chat. What are other resources that you would want? Are there other challenges that you as a municipality are facing, or that are standing between you and moving forward? And I'll just kind of open it up from there. Or questions you have about the resources that we are offering. All right. Well, I'll give it a moment, folks. There we go. Jen, feel free to unmute yourself and hop in.
backyard composter and recently joined the Bootstrap composting service. One of the things that I've noticed is living in Providence is we can't really get our recycling rates up. So I feel like trying to work, like there are people who are really ready and really engaged. And I know that there have been drop-off sites for a while and people are really using those. But to try to move to a place where we had larger uptake, I feel like if we can't do that for single stream recycling, like the composting process is going to be really challenging. So I'm wondering, like, are you working with cities around, public education that would look at both of these issues? Because I feel like thinking about waste in a broader way is, it's valuable to think about it together. And then secondarily, I know that my neighbors do not love that I'm a backyard composter, even though it doesn't smell. They have this sense of like, if they see it or whatever, they have this sense of like, oh, you're just like throwing garbage in a pile in the backyard. And yeah, I'm wondering if you thought about education, not just for those who might want to compost, but a broader public education about backyard composting or even saving scraps and like why it's valuable to do that.
Well, the short answer is yes. The slightly longer answer is that, we definitely understand that there are a lot of misconceptions about composting. And we are also, to your point, leery of making composting into recycling because we are so focused on ensuring that, not only do we divert food waste, but we're able to produce a, usable product that can help heal our soils moving forward, right? I do think that this is just my personal opinion, that there are some advantages to composting in that it can just be food scraps as opposed to 10 different types of plastics. But we understand that, again, there's going to need to be a ton of education as part of all of the things that we're doing to help with that. And, one of the things you might read in the report is that we ran into a community that is very concerned with rats. And they have an existing rat problem and nobody's composting. And, one of the things that we in the compost community understand is that one of the best ways to address rats is to get the food waste out of the stream. And so, but we understand that there's a challenge in addressing that perception. And so, yeah, again, education and outreach needs to be a big part of what we're doing to address all of those perceptions, whether real or just kind of a perception. Let's see, I see there's a few different questions here in the chat about current solid waste permitting laws inhibiting composting. I'm going to have to agree there with Tess. From compared to other states that I've seen, Rhode Island's laws are fairly supportive of that. But, I think a lot of it comes down to our sort of land use concerns. Obviously we have some of the most expensive land in the country. And so we need to, as I said earlier, educate on all of the different options and opportunities to use our land effectively in order to, make sure we're having the infrastructure that is needed. Let's see here.
Isaac, if you scroll up a little bit before that, Carla had a comment in the chat.
Yeah, I see Carla is talking about how there is
all over the place.
A great small scale processing site in Providence here. And we definitely welcome folks to think about checking those out. We're happy to, provide connections and get you, on board there. We'll try and include as many of these as we can into our templates that we have going forward. But honestly, sometimes the best way to do it is just to come take a look, and we welcome you to come do that. Let's see what other.
I think my question was a little bit after that, when celebrating the success of states like Massachusetts for their food waste bans and also their compost funding structure that we might want to replicate. How do we, in Rhode Island, as we structure all of this, how do we prioritize local processing and make it less scary for municipalities, as opposed to what other states are doing, sending it to anaerobic digester, putting strain on our wastewater system, or sending it far away, which isn't a local process, sending the profit elsewhere, or sending it even out of state? How can we keep it more in our loop at a local level, while also reconciling the numbers that, the tonnage we need to cope with?
Yeah, I mean, so I will say broadly that we support an all of the above approach and want to see, composting happen at all levels. I think part of that is making sure that we have the funding in place, but also, again, thinking about the different models. So, I would venture many municipalities are not as familiar with different types of technologies for composting as, those of us in the industry, if you will. So we want to make it easy to understand and access, so that they have the options and opportunities on a local scale. We want to help them think about land use and things of that nature, so that, yeah, when the right opportunity is there, and I think there's a question maybe coming up about yard waste, that we can think about how that can be done effectively using existing infrastructure as much as possible, but supplementing that in the areas that is feasible and necessary. So I do see here something about yard waste, especially in the fall, is also a major concern. It seems to make sense to combine efforts to compost both food and yard waste. Are there towns that are doing this? My understanding is that there are not, but there have been communities that have wanted to do that. They've run into some issues with community support and perceptions of odors and vectors. But we want to work with them to, again, provide that education, that outreach, and understanding of the different technologies, so that if this is something they in fact want to do, that they are supported in making that happen. And yeah, I mean, so I see a comment here that poorly tended compost in place with rats definitely attracts them. It can, that is true. And that's why we want to make sure that those who are composting, whether it's in their backyard or on a larger scale, are supported so that they are not composting poorly. We want to see good composting happen. We want to see good products. We want to be good neighbors. And that's really our goal here.
I think that's where funding good jobs consistently comes in. We can, build a site and do cute small scale composting until the grant runs out, and then it's an unattended pile, right? And an eyesore for the neighborhood. So like making sure that funding stays consistent.
Yep. So we definitely want to make sure that we have consistent sources of funding, and we are highlighting the models that can work. And I'm working to write that up in our Wasted Food Solutions Action Plan as we speak. So let's see here. Lavinia, I see you have a comment about restaurants and other sources of food waste. How can this be addressed within a small community? Our community center serves lunches and had food waste, but doesn't have capacity. We have 2 small restaurants that don't compost. How do we educate them? Well, we have a lot of great composters that are doing that work. And so definitely as part of the resources that we're going to be putting out, we can connect you with them. That is, I think, a great place to start. And then again, if we can help you either think about applying for a grant or, if you can help the compost fund come into fruition, I think that'll be a great way to support some of those folks and get them the resources they need in the short term. Let's see here. What else am I missing here? So, Rosie, you asked what types of programs or services were towns most interested in? I would say that would, mostly, I think folks were interested in drop-offs and sort of curbside programs, but again, they wanted to figure out how they're going to fund that and what does that actually look like in their community. Has there been any consideration on purchasing equipment such as tumble screeners that can be available to a municipality to process their compost materials at their location? Also, is there any assistance on the distribution of the finished compost material? So I love these questions. I haven't really heard of any consideration for processing equipment. I did go to the landfill and see that they have some fantastic turners there that we'd love to be turning food waste, but that's a whole nother challenge.
Could I offer something on that?
Sure, absolutely, Gene.
So we have a medium-sized compost facility at our Public Works Department. And one of the challenges that we've run into is, this past year has not been too bad, but the previous year was extremely wet. So to run that through a traditional screener was not possible, kept getting clogged up. So now we have a surplus of material. Now, we are in a good season that it has been relatively dry. But the problem is that every place that I've called does not have a tumble screener available to come in and process that material. So the hesitation, not real hesitation, but the concern that I have is if we were to start introducing a collection process for food waste to incorporate into that, and I don't have the equipment to process it properly, now I have a bigger problem as opposed to just a pile of leaf waste. Now I have food compost and everything that's in it also. And we've turned it. I've got 3 or 4 windrows out there right now that I just need to screen them, but I can't get the equipment. And for one municipality to make that type of a purchase for what you're literally only using a few weeks out of the year is extremely challenging. So if you had, when you're looking at having some of this funding, if you were to go out and buy a machine that could be transported to individual sites, if there was commitment from the municipalities that they're going to have X amount to process, you could move that to each site. I've rented them in the past. The last time I rented it, it was almost $4,000 a day. So they're expensive pieces of equipment.
Yeah, so I love the idea here, and there definitely are in other places, municipalities that'll sort of share some of this equipment, and I think that's definitely something that could be great. And I would, I see Josh here in the chat mentioned about the compost fund bill, which, is designed specifically so that 50% of all the funds would go directly back to the municipalities to fund. I don't see any reason why it couldn't fund exactly the type of thing you're talking about. So we would, love to see that. And as Nessa said, shared equipment, great idea. So yeah, I love that you're bringing that up and I really appreciate that. So, let's see. Lavinia, I see you, how are we interacting with schools? Little Compton's single school is composting and recycling. We encourage our adults to follow suit. We send out a mailer to the community. Our students do it. Adults can compost too. So there's a lot of different aspects to your questions there that I love and want to address. So we have one of the more effective programs here in Rhode Island that I've seen, which without giving them too much credit, is the Rhode Island School Recycling Project. And so we love to see when there are those out there supporting, you know, the schools moving forward like they are doing. And, you know, but I will also want to say that, you know, if you have a program in place and you feel like it is successful, but now you want to see it move to the next step, or maybe you don't have a program at all, but you just want to see some education, that is part of the resources that we are happy to offer. But it can't just be education, because if I educate all these students on how to do it, and they're excited to do it, but I don't have a program in place in my town for, you know, giving backyard composters, for dropping off food scraps, for curbside pickup. If I don't have those programs in place, the students can yell all they want that we should do it, but it's probably not going to happen. And so it needs to, again, be sort of this all above approach where let's educate the students, let's get them excited, let's make sure those programs are in place so that when they go home, they can say, this is what we should do. Let's see. I see Tess has mentioned, yeah, that there are a number of cooperative equipment ownership models. And so we'll love to include those, and we'll follow up more. Greg mentions the Rhode Island School Recycling Project is expanding rapidly. And I think, you know, I would agree with that. And so hopefully, you know, within, as Greg said, within 4 years, hopefully they can be in every town. And then we can really see the success from one school to the next school, and support that, as I said, with programs throughout the community. Yeah, I'll just say, you know, we are always thinking about Carla, diverting food waste being great and how its processing does matter. We want to make sure that there are, you know, good end products that are delivered at the end of the day, that can be used in farms and, you know, municipal roadside projects and all of the different ways that we can use compost. And we'll be doing a study this coming year on, you know, the market for finished compost. So that's something to look out for in the coming year as well, to support, okay, you're gonna start composting. Well, here's some of the ways that it can be used, and here's, you know, the market for it. So, all right, what else have I missed? Anyone else want to come off mute and ask us a question? So let's see, Lavinia, I see you have another one here. There's a bill that was introduced this past session. Will you explain it, the composting bill? Sure. So there was I think it was called Organics Diversion and Composting Fund bill, something to that effect. The idea was to put a $2 charge on all waste going to the landfill, and that could be used in a variety of different ways for, you know, food waste reduction, donation, and composting programs. The way it was structured is that it would be in a dedicated fund, where 50% of the funds, after you know, the necessary funds to administer it, would go to the municipalities in non-competitive grants, but of course they had to use it for the purposes that are laid out. And then 50% would be to competitive grants, which could be the municipalities, but also could be nonprofits and others. We've seen great results in other states like New York and Massachusetts, where they provide technical assistance for businesses, where they, you know, do all different types of things with these funds. And so we wanted to make sure that, you know, the municipalities are being supported, as you are the number one folks when it comes to managing waste. But we also wanted to make sure that there are some of these other opportunities to support the community that, you know, groups across the country are providing. So I hope that kind of explains the bill. And Josh, you can let me know if I missed anything there. So all right, well, we're about 2 minutes in. I do again want to recommend that you go to our website, check out our municipal fact sheets, check out this report, of course, and then get in touch and, you know, tell us what else we should be offering. And, you know, I love that suggestion earlier about the, you know, combined purchasing of equipment. And so I really appreciate everybody's time. And I look forward to bugging a lot of you again soon. So thank you for everyone who attended. Really appreciate it.